In this episode, we nerd out over cameras we could never afford, we break down the latest series of Doctor Who, and touch on the moral side of AI.
Hey.
Cool, pretty close.
The famous clap.
Yeah,
but not.
we're gonna have to get some clapper boards, aren't we? Do it properly.
Oh, I've got one.
Yeah, I haven't got one anymore. I used to have a decent chalkboard one, but I don't know what happened to that. Long gone.
We're gonna have to get with the times and just do the old digital.
Oh yeah.
Digital ones.
That's what it's all about now. True.
I remember when I thought they were really fancy.
The digital ones.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh my god, I don't have to worry about my ink running out anymore, or the hinge coming off of the top of the clapperboard.
But when we...
Or my poor hands.
Yeah, you got to think when we started university and started our education in filmmaking, we kind of, smartphones were barely a thing, right? We were still using Blackberries, So the idea of a full screen phone, I think the iPad wasn't even out, was it, at that time? So
no, you was at my house when the iPad launched.
Oh, the unveiling, the Apple unveiling.
Yeah. You was at my old crappy student flat
in Mitcham. Yeah.
No, not in Mitcham.
Oh no, it was in Nottingham. Nottingham. Yeah.
So not just so you can understand. This is not Nottingham for November. This is Mottingham for is it Mike in the phonetic?
Yes, I believe so.
Alphabet.
Mottingham in Kent.
Mike.
That's Mottingham in Kent.
But going back, I remember that night when the iPad launched, because you and me were held around our MacBooks.
Oh yeah.
And oh my god, this thing's incredible! You can just take it anywhere you want without having to lug this massive charger.
We were talking about how useful it would be on set, and it's just funny because since then, every single VFX supervisor, script supervisor, never without an iPad now. So
no.
Yeah.
A clapperboard.
Yeah, it does everything.
Digital clapperboard.
Exactly.
But yeah, going back to where we met at Ravensbourne.
Yeah.
I'm still quite proud to say I went to rave. I mentioned it to a few people I've met along the way, and they're like, "Where did you go and study?" And I said rave, and they're like, "Oh."
Yeah, it's definitely one of those institutions that people in media, especially in the UK, hold with a high regard. So me too. I'm really, really glad we met there as well.
It was almost like doing a 3-year master degree. That's how I felt the course was, because it was just 3 years into, although we went into other aspects along the way, 3 years hardcore editing, to get that core subject ingrained.
Exactly.
And it was a small class when you think about, compared to, I don't know about your background in school, but my classes in London were huge. To go from a class of 35, 36 kids down to that, I really felt like I was actually learning something.
Yeah, you had the attention of the tutors, and also I feel like you mentioned with the course, it was quite focused. It wasn't too generalized. It wasn't we weren't spread too thin. So like you said, it felt like 3 years of just doing post-production and not, veering into other areas, and that was super useful, for sure. A great foundation for going into industry, and also, so this is turning into an advertisement for Ravensbourne, isn't it?
No, we're not sponsored.
Yeah, we're not sponsored at all. On that course, I will say I appreciated that it was very much theory based. Wasn't necessarily software based. I mean, they had obviously the training of using the software, but the skills that we learned there can apply to any tool. So as the software changed in the the years after university, the theory remained, and I think that's really important for that kind of teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it was really weird. I remember us having the exam on the Avid system, but never anything else. It was like the last 10 of the century for the old school Avid.
Yeah.
You must know Avid as an industry standard.
Yeah, this was 2009, 2010. So at that time, Final Cut Pro was still a thing, right? It was still kind of used a lot.
Like the underdog at that point.
The underdog at that thing. at that point. Avid was kind of the main one. DaVinci wasn't around. Premiere was barely taken seriously as an editing software at the time. Speaking of editing software, I did download Resolve after you mentioned playing around with it, and I think it's a bit of a learning curve compared to Premiere Pro and stuff. But once you play around with it, I think it's brilliant. It's good software. It feels free, yeah, and it feels like a step up from Premiere Pro, which is what I've been using for my own personal editing the last couple of years. So I'm going to be sticking with Resolve, and I know from being in the visual effects industry the last couple of years that is the way a lot of the smaller studios are going as well. They all tend to use Resolve now, so it's getting a lot of traction in industry.
Yeah. There's some add-ons and plugins, but there's enough, I think, in there. I think there's way more in there, in that piece of free software, than what we could have even dreamt of. I mean, and the thing is, this is making us sound like we're ancient, and we're not. And this is how far media has come.
Yeah.
In, since say 2012.
Yeah.
So what? 12 years ago. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
And some things haven't changed. Actually, we were watching the football last night.
Oh, yeah.
And we got to the end of the England match. And then we wanted to see the result of Denmark, because obviously that affected England. Switched over to ITV4. And I don't know if this was just us or not. I don't know. But it's not HD.
Oh, really? That might just be ITV4 isn't HD.
And I said that.
Yeah, it might be standard definition still. I don't know. I haven't,
I said that to, Abby. And I was like, wow, this has always been like this. It just looks worse because our TV's bigger and better.
Yeah. And you can always tell when you go from a high def match to a standard definition. It's like, it suddenly looks so pixelated. It's like, an assault on the eyes.
And the wrinkles.
Yeah, you miss it all.
I remember we went to the expo, right? And this just shows how far we've come. I saw a really good deal on tapes. Do you remember?
They were still using tapes. Oh, man, yeah.
We're still on the Panasonic P2s.
Yeah.
Panasonic P2s. I'm pretty sure that's what it was, and we loved that camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I was
a great camera.
I was thinking about it recently. It's like when I was in, college, it was like DVX 100 was like the greatest camera ever, right? That was all the colleges.
That was a great camera.
Yeah, because it shot 24p, didn't it? It shot like film,
Mm-hmm. Oh God, I'm just thinking about my time when I worked at Camaraderie, and I'd get a chance to play around with everything, and I think one of the big things was the fact that you could switch it from PAL to NTSC. And that was one big thing.
It's so nuts because that's not even a thing now. Like now it's just HD, 720, 1080, like PAL and NTSC. That's like going back to back in time. That is
2012.
Yeah, that's history right there.
But that was a big thing because that meant that the shoots I was arranging, we could do more because I could then crew and organize the shoots that could then go to the States.
Oh, so, okay, yeah.
Right, I organized a shoot it was a special for the episode for the show 24. They were over here. Was
it the season they did where they did like some of it in the UK? There was a UK season of 24, in London. I remember. I don't really watch the show, but I remember the press for it at the time.
I don't, but I had to see bits of it, and we did that, and then we did I Didn't Know I Was Pregnant season 2.
Oh yeah, classic TLC show. We just sound like a bunch of old people talking about the way back in our day. It was much back in our day.
It's not even that long ago.
It's not that long ago.
We're literally
DVX 100.
Oh God! And then when I was ready to take out a loan when the Canon C300 came out.
Oh God, yeah, that was like.
Oh God, that.
It's so funny, isn't
that
it? Like,
beauty.
I'm not that up on camera tech now, but I know there's been like huge advancements lately with like Blackmagic releasing some really crazy new stuff.
Yep.
And but remember when the Red came out? We wanted the Red so badly,
Oh
didn't
my
we? And
God.
then Muzzy got hold of one. Do you remember? Oh
Yeah.
man, good times.
Oh God, yeah. Because the way it would work, if any of you are listening to this who don't know what a Red camera is, it was like imagine a phantom camera for regular camera shoots. So
because it could shoot like fast frame rate and stuff, couldn't it?
way far, yeah. So it became really smooth.
Yeah.
And that's why they became like the camera to go to for music videos and your wildlife, and that's why we used it for those music videos that we did.
Oh, at the time it was like so. I mean,
my
like Peter
God.
Jackson was shooting films on it and stuff. Do you remember
Yeah.
that? It was like a First World War movie, wasn't it? That he shot on a Red camera, and then they started using it in TV and film. It was always like Red versus Arri Alexa, wasn't it? That was always the whole debate at the time.
And Blackmagic started to come in.
Yeah.
But what was the way that it worked with Red, if memory serves me, is you didn't just hire the camera, you had to hire the operator.
Yeah.
Because they were so expensive.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah, because they were so expensive, certain people would be able to afford one or get a loan out. So if you're a camera op and you're looking to up your game, take out a loan, grab a Red camera, you're guaranteed work because they have to hire you to work the camera. You're not just going to hire a Red camera and get any old Joe to go in, because it's a different,
Exactly.
There's no normal focus puller and stuff like that on it.
Exactly.
So this week, we wanted to focus on Doctor Who.
Into the vortex. I have the whole universe at my fingertips.
Oh, this is new.
You can't! Abbey Road Studios!
Yeah, so the finale, as of recording, the finale just aired at the weekend, the final episode of Series 14, also known as Series 1, also known as...
Yeah, that was confusing for me.
It's very confusing. So, yeah, the show's obviously... Doctor Who as a show's been running for 50 years, right? Or 60 years now. So it's technically... season... I lose track of what season it is if you include it from the very first episode in 1963. But if you include... So the BBC count it from the reboot, which was 2005, which makes it season 14. However, the showrunner, who I'll be talking about probably quite a lot, Russell T Davies, he likes to refer to it as season 1. And Disney, who now produced Doctor Who, referred to it as season 1 because obviously they're trying to find a new audience. So it's a bit confusing. And that's kind of stuff I wanted to go into. To give a bit of background, like Chris has brand new to Doctor Who. Like what's your history with the show?
So growing up, obviously 2005. So in that time, I have watched the odd episode. One thing I will say is I always remember seeing the adverts for the Christmas special.
Yes.
And always, excuse me, and always going, oh, that looks so good. And then just never getting round to watching it.
Yeah.
So I've always had that, especially for the things that I like, big nerdy, background in gaming and
Dungeons and Dragons and
just, all that sort of anime and the typical stuff really. I'm reading, and so it plays into and the theatrical side of things.
Sure.
I just love it.
It's it's like campy, fun, sci-fi. It's kind of right up your alley, really.
Yeah, escapism, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to get into it, but I always fell into it at the wrong period. Like I have watched episodes before, way back, enjoyed it, but then caught up again and thought, I have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah, do you think it's an accessibility thing? It's a daunting show to start watching, isn't it? When you look at the history of it as a newcomer, it can be a bit daunting.
Well, before we arranged this, I think I told you a couple months ago, me and my partner decided we both individually or have always wanted to get into Doctor Who, so we didn't know where to start. So we went onto the BBC iPlayer, and I think it was because maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, is it the end of last year or beginning of this year, they added the whole backlog?
That was for the 60th anniversary, which was about the end of summer last year was the 60th anniversary of the show. So yeah, at that time, Russell T Davies, the writer I mentioned earlier, he's he's the guy who rebooted it in 2005. He came back to the show, so he'd been away for about 10 years. It was ran in that time, it was run by two different showrunners. He was off doing other things. But yeah, he came back when Disney got involved. And he came back on the 60th anniversary with 3 specials last year. And then the Christmas special, which was the big end of last year. And then the new season, which is season 14. And around about that time, they include the whole back catalogue on iPlayer to really give people, a lot of those episodes have not been available for watching for many years. So for hardcore, old school Doctor Who fans, it was like a dream come true,
Yeah. Well, we took advantage of it, and we started watching it from the very beginning.
It's rough. It's rough. Those early seasons.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. Weirdly, the day that we arranged to do Doctor Who as our first topic was the day that we found, I can't remember if it's 63, 73, I can't remember, don't quote me, film adaptation of the beginning of Doctor Who. And it's literally just, it's almost shot for shot.
Wow.
I mean, it was a remake to the word. There was a few Daleks were in there a lot earlier.
Yeah, I don't know the history of that. That might be because I know the BBC have a lot of issues with like losing footage, like footage degrading because it was filmed on, the old big videotapes, right? That's all they could record on back then. So it might have been a case of let's preserve this by reshooting it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Just to give a bit of background on me, I've been a Doctor Who fan for a long time, but I would say I'm by no means versed in the old show from the 60s, 70s, 80s. When Doctor Who relaunched in 2005, I was like 15 years old, so perfect age for it really, and kind of got into it then. So, but I would say I've seen most of it, like all of the shows since then. I've kept up with all of the Doctors and kind of have my favorite era and all that, so definitely a bit more versed in it.
Just to back that up, I remember you had, it might have been when we went to Forbidden Planet one day, just for a day out, a couple of years ago, and you bought that TV remote thing. Do you remember? It was the Doctor controller
Sonic
thing.
Screwdriver.
That was it, and it was infrared. And you kept turning the telly off and on.
Yes.
All the time. I remember that.
It was Matt Smith's
that was it.
Sonic Screwdriver. It had this like TV control function that I never quite figured out because it was all gesture control. It was like to turn the volume up, you did this. It was around the time of the Wii, I guess.
Yeah, it was. The Wii was still going
gesture
at
controls.
that point, or maybe the birth of Kinect.
Yeah.
God, that thing lived and died pretty quickly, didn't it? But yeah, I remember that. So just so you can understand.
Yeah, I had a. Do you remember I had
a
phone case for years as well? That was the TARDIS,
God,
right? That was all through uni,
yeah.
wasn't it? So cool.
And,
so I'm curious. I'm kind of excited to see what you've felt as someone who's brand new to the show. Like you said, not really had much history with it. How it works. So, I think Disney and the BBC kind of didn't do a great job at instructing people the order, when to start, what to watch with the new season. So did you end up watching the Christmas special or not? The one from...
No.
Okay.
And I like I said earlier, I always caught the advert to the Christmas special. So I should have know that is also, excuse me, a transition episode into the new
Yeah, so
series?
usually it's like, a lot of the time it's just like a one-off episode that features, the current Doctor. But this was also really, but then with this season it's even more confusing because that wasn't technically the first episode of Ncuti Gatwa.
Right.
Basically what happened is for the 60th anniversary they put out 3 specials. This was the end of 2023, before the Christmas special. And those 3 specials were David Tennant coming back to play the Doctor again 10 years on, because he hadn't been a Doctor. Since him, there'd been 3 other Doctors, right? You had David Tennant regenerated to Matt Smith, who regenerated into Peter Capaldi, who regenerated into Jodie Whittaker. Then they brought him back for 3 episodes, and then it was on those 3 specials that they introduced Ncuti Gatwa, who then went into the Christmas special as his first episode.
Right, okay.
So there's a few episodes there that I wish I'd told you to start with. I just think they could have done a better job. It's weird because it's like Russell T Davies and Doctor Who BBC writers or whatever. It's like they're trying to appeal to new audience. They want to launch it as like a new thing for new audiences, but at the same time, they're not really helping people. They're making it a lot of work for a new audience member. And they're almost aiming it at already established fans with like the 60th and bringing Tennant back and all that, They do that thing, at least they did on Disney at the beginning of Space Babies, where like Ncuti Gatwa does a huge info dump where he talks about everything that's happened for the past few seasons. I don't know if you remember, the opening scene is him just basically exposition. He's talking about this, that, and it's like way too much information in one scene. And it's like that was them trying to catch people up, but I don't think it was the most effective way to do that. The reason I mention it is because you just watched the finale, right? You just watched the last episode, and all of that stuff with Ruby and like her mother and stuff probably felt like it came out of nowhere for you, right?
Yeah.
The first episode,
but it was good.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, but the first episode, Church on Ruby Road, is all about how she was left as a baby at the church in a basket, and she didn't know who her mother was. It basically starts with like she's on a show with Davina McCall doing like trying to find out who her parents is. That's how we're first introduced to Ruby. She's trying to find out who her mother is. So it comes full circle in the finale. And this is what I'm saying about poorly signposted, what order to watch it in, because like you watched the whole series, but you probably felt like, where did this come from?
A little bit, but I also took the grain of salt that's down to me for not have, because I haven't watched.
Oh, you assumed it was introduced last season or something like.
It's something like that, yeah.
Okay.
There is something quite funny there when you mentioned about Davina McCall.
Yeah, she's in the episode, the first one.
Yeah, so I think there was one point where I went to go and get a drink from the kitchen. I still had it playing. I heard something about Davina.
She mentioned, I think Ruby says, oh yeah, she's really nice, talking about Davina to Rose, I believe. Yeah.
In Doctor Who, do they always reference real life things? So like celebrities, songs. Do they always do that?
Yeah, it's a very Russell T Davies thing. He loves, you can tell from interviews, he loves British television. He's always been a big fan of British TV.
Yeah.
He always says we should hold our own on the world stage, and he's a big fan of soaps. That's why a lot of the actors tend to be, I think Ruby's from Curry, right? A lot of the actors tend to be from soaps. So he's just that kind of writer. So I think he always tries to get references to British TV and where he can. I don't know if you remember, you might have, because back in the very first 2005 reboot season with Richard Eccleston, there's a whole episode where they go to the future and they appear on an episode of The Weakest Link, and there's a robot, Anne Robinson, called the Android, and she's like, when the people get eliminated from The Weakest Link, they get like deleted from existence. That's kind of the whole concept of it. But yeah, he loves that stuff.
Okay, yeah. No, I've seen clips of that because it's been around. No, I did want to mention about the soap thing. Hopefully you know that this is way past my age bracket, but I know who it is just from TV culture. But Angie from the first ever series of EastEnders. Do She's in there. Did you know who she was?
I'm not sure, but I'm guessing she's the Mrs. Flood.
She okay, so there's two EastEnder actresses in it in this series sorry, and they act together. I don't know if you remember or if you ever used to watch it when Patrick and Yolanda. So there's Yolanda.
Rings a bell.
Anyone listening? I'll show you some
For those
pictures
old school
after.
EastEnders aficionados.
Yeah, like I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that. But she's Angie, and she's the one who she had the first ever Christmas. Doof, 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 doof,
Oh, like the big moment.
I think they had like the big first ever one.
Oh, okay.
She's quite big in the soap world. So who they were in Doctor Who in this series was Ruby's, I'm going to call her grandma in the bed.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the lady that was looking after her, that's Ange.
Oh, okay.
So right, so those two.
So yeah, the lady's
from
looking after
EastEnders.
her is Mrs. Flood, which is what I said. She is like obviously introduced as quite a mysterious, like almost like fourth wall breaking character. You know, like she talks to the
Duration.
Yeah, she talks to camera at the end of the season, obviously, and she does it in the Christmas special again that you didn't watch.
Oh, okay.
She breaks the fourth wall in that. She turns to the camera and says, "Never seen a TARDIS before," and it's like you're like, "What's going on?" She knows more than she's letting on, sort of thing. So yeah,
Right,
and also the writer Russell Davies has hinted that her story is going to be explored more next season. So not the last we've seen of that character.
The references to issues today. Now, is that also a thing that tends to happen, or is that quite big in this series?
I feel like Russell T Davies, again, as a writer, he likes to reference real world stuff. Now, for me, the best science fiction is usually an allegory for real world. Good examples for me include like the Battlestar Galactica series, which had a lot of references to real world politics at the time the Iraq War was happening, and they kind of really dive into that in the show. And I think that's the best sci-fi does that, right? Everything from Star Wars, really. Lucas talks about how the rebels were inspired by the Viet Cong at the time, but now you could take that and apply it to many cultures who where it's like an inferior rebel guerrilla force versus a superpower. So I do feel like allegory is a big part of it, but Russell T Davies in the last few years has been quite political. He made that show Years and Years, the British show, which that was him, which is very political about like near future Britain and slipping into fascism, basically, right? And
It's a Sin. He wrote
It's a Sin
as well.
Yeah, and Queer as Folk in the 90s was him.
Queer as Folk.
Yeah,
it was a good show. Obviously the British one.
Yeah, he did the British one.
There's the American.
He did the show Casanova, I believe, was him. He did.
Which was
Tennant.
David Tennant. I remember that being quite big at the time.
He did I haven't watched it, but he did that Cilla Black thing from a couple of years ago on
that was great.
the ITV thing.
I love
that. That was him.
Yeah.
Again, British TV icons. He loves that stuff. I really like him as a writer. He's It's a Sin is an amazing show. I think that's probably my favorites of his work.
It's on my list to watch. I know I've kind of not watched it because I know it's going to be a hard watch.
It's hard. It's a hard watch.
Yeah.
But it's very well done. I found it great. And Cucumber as well, which is kind of like a Queer as Folk sort of spiritual successor.
Episode 3, which is Boom.
Yes, which I enjoyed.
The wartime battle ambulance thing.
AI. It goes into AI, like the guy who gets recreated.
It touched.
Yeah.
Yeah, goes into that. So we've got obviously the moral aspect. It touches on the moral aspect of bringing somebody back in digital form, which is obviously quite big at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's happening now with ABBA. Obviously, they're still alive, all 4 of them. But who's to say they couldn't do the ABBA Voyage with another band. I know they recreated those using them physically for some aspects.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you wouldn't need them with the way technology is going. And
it's true.
Morally, I listened to a podcast a week, 2 weeks ago. I think I sent you a text, a message about it. I'll try and find the name of it. And it was a debate about, should you use AI for music and film for actors and musicians that have passed? Well, there's the argument to say that they can't say no. And two, somebody else debated saying, well, if you're using material they've created already, why could you not use that to enhance and recreate something and create something from their creations that they didn't finish? So that was a counter argument. But for me, doesn't sit right. It never has sat right.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because you could say like this actor was super talented, but then it's like, if it's an AI reconstruction of their talent, it's not really their talent. It's not them, is it? It's a computer algorithm based on them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting one. And it's like, we are getting to a point in the future, I think, where you'd be able to say, oh, I want to watch the original Speed, but I want, James Dean in the lead instead of Keanu Reeves. I can see that happening in the future, with the way AI tech's going. But yeah, there's so many moral questions around that. Like,
yeah, there's also another aspect I heard something about, and it got me thinking as well. So, say for example, you have a film and you need to cast a young girl.
Yeah.
So say 20 to 25, right?
Yeah.
Now, they may not find the actress that they have in mind for that age bracket for that character.
Yeah, like they audition 100 actors and they're not happy with any of them. Yeah.
Right? So that happens. That's the scenario. Who's to say it would be right for then a director, I'm not saying anyone's done this, but this is just a scenario that could potentially happen, and there's different strands to this, using that technology, hypothetically speaking, it's active and it's working, of a world-renowned older actress, and using them, but not casting them as their current age.
Yeah, so there's been a few examples already of this.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw the latest Indiana Jones film.
No, but I've heard about him being younger.
Yeah, the first 20 minutes, they basically have him as he is in the age of the old movies using AI. Yeah. It's pretty well done. Some people didn't like it. I thought it was pretty well done. Like, it looked pretty good to me. But yeah, they filmed Harrison Ford as his age now and de-aged him digitally for those scenes.
Okay.
The one thing that's weird about that is you can make someone look younger using this technology, and it's incredible. But the way the actor carries themselves, the way they perform, is impacted by the age, right? Like, if you're a 75-year-old man, you're not going to be moving with the energy of a 35-year-old. That's the thing that sometimes gives it away. So they do have workarounds for that. They can do, they can use Harrison for the close-ups, and then for the wide shots, they can use a different younger actor who has a similar build, and then just do face replacement. And there are ways around it. But yeah, I find if it's an older actor playing a younger part, it's the way they carry themselves that gives it away. I don't know if you saw the Toys R Us commercial that came out a few days ago.
No.
Okay, so yeah,
Did I see it?
You maybe check it out. It's they're touting it as the very first fully AI generated TV ad. No filming, no actors, nothing. It's entirely generated by this new Sora, which is this new I think it's OpenAI's new software. So Toys R Us partnered with some creative agency, which I don't know, chastise this creative agency for really leaning into AI the way they are, but yeah, they partnered with a creative agency who created this advert in Sora, and you know, it's not great. It's rightly getting a backlash from people because why couldn't they just gone out and filmed the commercial, you know? But at the same time, they're using it as a marketing stunt. We've created the first AI commercial, so I don't blame them there. It just,
I think I found it.
yeah, it's like a little boy with a giraffe, but yeah, completely generated artificially. There's no, you know, filming or anything. And it's,
I'm just gonna watch it now.
yeah, sure, go for it.
Very Philosopher's Stone. No, Page Master. It's very Page Master. That's what it's taken inspiration from.
Yeah, people.
Which is Macaulay Culkin.
It's weird, right? It's like.
It's like, what have I taken by accident?
And look at the bikes in the background. They're all kind of like merging together. They're not quite separated.
Yeah.
There's some weird, like, weird stuff happening.
Giraffes coming in weird and.
Yeah, but I mean, Chris, this is entirely generated by a computer. There's no human involvement in any of these pictures. It's kind of bonkers, really.
Jesus. Poor Jeffrey. That is. Whatever they're spiking him with is not good.
And the kid's like, I don't know, Charlie Bucket or something. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. Honestly, if you so one of my favorite films of all time is The Page Master, and
I've not seen it. I don't think. No, I need to check that out.
Oh, nobody really knows about this film, but it's one of my favorite films of all time. One, because of nostalgia, and two, my love for
God, it is, isn't it?
Animation.
I just saw it. Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah, completely. Wow.
It's the Page Master.
Yeah, that's where they trained that
The
AI
algorithm is going.
on the Page Master.
I'm telling you.
That's funny. It looks similar sort of concept too with the magic and stuff. Yeah.
Mhm. It's the tone of the blue. His round glasses. All they had to do is make him blonde.
That's funny, man.
And yeah, I'm telling
Macaulay
you. Macaulay
Culkin in the live action version there.
Oh no, it's one film.
Oh, sorry. He goes from the real world into the animated world. Okay, I see.
Yeah,
I see.
it's all hand drawn.
I see.
All hand
I wasn't sure if they
painted.
made an
Amazing
adaptation,
film.
but yeah, that makes sense. So I do
No.
not know this film at all. I've got to say.
How
That's
have
hilarious.
we been friends for so long and I've never pointed you in that
That's
direction?
funny,
of that?
man.
Check that out.
Oh well, that's
I'd love you.
It's just
I'd love you to.
you
check that
nailed
film
it though with the reference because looking at the picture of the Page
100%.
Master, yeah, that's funny.
You're in need of adventure.
Classic. Boy gets stuck in the library. 3 different worlds of 3 different stories. Whoopi Goldberg does a voice. Might be.
Oh, Leonard Nimoy and Patrick Stewart are in it apparently.
There's a good
Oh, Christopher
cast.
Lloyd, yeah, cool.
Christopher Lloyd. He is the Page Master.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
But yeah, going back to the AI thing, it's interesting. Like, you know, you talk about how it is basically that looks like what it's based on. It could very well be that they trained it on some images from that movie, right? Because that's the thing about AI.
not many people know it.
Well, yeah, that's the thing about AI. It's always been it's trained on data that comes from somewhere, right? And that's the reason why there's a big argument about like copyrights, and there's some discussions happening right now in the music industry where I think Sony and a few other record labels are starting to consider lawsuits against the AI tech companies because they're saying this song is trained on data that, you know, someone's generated an audio track. It's like this song is trained on data that we own the copyright to. So there's a lot of questions about how that's going to go in court, and it might be that the film studios follow suit because all that needs to be proven is, and I've seen some examples of this already, where someone puts in like, you know, Batman, types in what they want to see, Batman at night in Gotham City, and then an image comes up that looks just like something from a Batman film. You know, almost you see the side-by-side comparison. It's like very similar framing, very similar layout. The suit might be slightly different, but otherwise it looks like a one-for-one. And then the question is like, so are they just taking the training data from that Batman film? Is that where they're getting it from? If that's the case, then who owns the copyright to the new images? Because there's so much gray area. There's so much discussion around it. I'm really curious where it ends up, you know?
How many new courses do you think there's going to be, Matt, in the next 5 to 10 years of lawyers that just specialize in AI copyright law?
Yeah.
It's gonna boom.
It is going to be
It
a whole
really is.
field, isn't it? But then, you know, the real question is how long before the first AI lawyers, right, start
Yeah.
defending or prosecuting.
Just quoting.
Because you could technically say, like, maybe they make the perfect lawyer because they're completely unbiased, you know, they only provide facts or whatever it is. That's the thing about AI. They could start defending themselves in court.
Going back to Doctor Who in regards to this, episode 5, Dot and Bubble.
Yeah, what did you think of this one? Very divisive episode, this one.
I'll be honest, the first maybe 2 acts didn't really gel.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because I didn't really... You're not meant to like the protagonist anyway.
No,
right?
no.
But you're not meant to.
She's like the ultimate social media stereotype, right? That's kind of, you know.
Yeah. Influencer. But
yeah.
It's, if you haven't seen it, it's a bit like Matt said there, this utopia. You know, in the episode, not to give too much away, they only work for 2 hours a day. They have a digital round, but a bit like VR.
Like a VR
there we go.
headset.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Lost my words. A bit like a VR headset, but that's constant, and all it is it's just their followers having a chat. It's like a massive group chat. It's like that, and then it tells them how to walk. Well, not how to. Well, kind of how to walk.
It got to a point with her, right, where she
Yeah.
doesn't even have to think about walking anymore. The machine,
Just tells
the
her.
AI just tells her what to do. Yeah.
I didn't really gel with that episode too much until the very end.
It
where
kind of
got
comes
to...
together at the end, doesn't it? That final moment really is when you realize, like, oh wait, this is a study on like white supremacy, right? It's kind of what I took from it.
Well, I took that from the get-go when I saw when you see the grid of all
it's
the
all
friends
white
and you think,
faces, right?
Yeah, it's all 90s Barbies going on here.
It's all white
not
faces.
Seeing anyone.
Yeah, it's quite a good episode. I don't know if you rewatched it, but if you go back and check some of the earlier scenes before the end, there's so many overt references to the racism that are kind of there, but not so on the nose that you don't notice them right away. She's talking about how she thought she blocked him. She's confused.
Yeah,
you know,
I noticed that.
You know, there's a lot of
didn't look the same.
Dog whistles.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dog whistles earlier in the episode before they get to the straight up, like, you know, you can't ever.
You're different.
Yeah, you can't ever help us, or we can't ever be on the same team, sort of thing. At the end, I was really surprised that they went there. I remember.
I wasn't.
Yeah,
I wasn't with that.
Because I'm glad they did, but I'm surprised that they did such a big reference to like the fact that we had a black doctor so early in the show. I always thought that would be more in the historical context, you know, because the idea of like going back in time to like the 20s or whatever, 1800s, and having a black doctor would obviously be out of place in a lot of modern, you know, a lot of Western societies at that time. But they just instead they did an episode about racism set in the future, which I thought was really clever. Like the problems haven't been solved, you know. It's like if anything, they're worse, you know. And the fact that they tie it in with social media is kind of a statement on, you know, with the way Twitter, now X, is going and stuff like that. Racism is more prominent than ever now, you know. Yeah, I just saw a post recently which really blew my mind on X, and it was like, it wasn't about Doctor Who, it was about a medical doctor, but someone was saying how if they saw a black doctor, they would ask to be treated by someone else because they were probably just a diversity hire or not actually qualified to treat them. And this had like 10,000 likes, you know.
Wow.
On sites like X now, you can say whatever you want and people just agree with you, and the algorithm boosts the racist stuff because it's like, oh, this has got a lot of engagement, right?
Yeah, and well, what's happening in the UK, I'd say at the moment isn't really helping a certain party that I think is highlighting a lot of that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. It's a few days now, right? Next week after? Yeah, 4th, isn't it? 4th of July for the UK elections.
So week tomorrow.
Yeah, week tomorrow. Crazy stuff.
I think because he is the first black doctor, I was kind of anticipating and waiting for it.
Okay, that's great.
I was waiting. because even though I didn't watch Doctor Who before this, I knew. Obviously I saw the backlash about it.
The casting.
I saw it all, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
but,
the whole like woke Doctor Who thing makes me laugh because like Doctor Who's been woke since it came back in 2005, and Russell T Davies is one of the most woke writers around. Like he created Queer as Folk in the 90s, right? That's like pretty ahead of its time, wasn't it? You know, for doing.
I mean,
you know,
if you've ever seen it,
yeah, from 1995, 96. Yeah. That's really, you know. So he was creating woke content before woke was even a word. So this idea that like Doctor Who's woke now under Disney makes me laugh because first of all, Disney didn't really have any creative input. It was just BBC, Russell T Davies, and secondly, he's always been a woke writer, woke whatever that means. So he's been him, and he's like us, to quote me earlier, writing about what he knows. Obviously, he's not a time lord, but what I mean is the characteristics of somebody. Yeah,
he can write to hell and back.
Yeah,
you know, especially somebody who's flamboyant.
Exactly.
And
you see him in interviews and stuff. You know, yeah, he's very much like that.
He's always been about in interviews and stuff.
Yeah. So the big backlash I saw obviously was the original casting, which really pissed me off. It's like it's just a black guy, get over it. But then like when episode 2 Devil's Cord aired and they had the what's the name, Jinx Monsoon playing the what's the music,
Maestro
playing the Maestro, and
love that
massive backlash to that, of course. Gender this and trying to force this down the throats of our children. It's like, no, it's just cast an actor who plays a good, like, larger than life performance for a character who's meant to be larger than life. It just makes perfect sense, you know.
I believe they aired before Eurovision.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, now I'm a big Eurovision fan.
Yeah.
So knowing that it's obviously written by Russell T Davies, I knew that anyway. 2, seeing the second episode, so the Devil's Cord, which is Maestro, and if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. It's so good. It's very, very camp. It's RuPaul, you know,
yes,
times 10, you know, it's that thing. So obviously what's going to follow? Eurovision.
Makes sense.
They know. So the fact that they're saying, shoving this down our children's throats and stuff like that, no, what they're doing is they know the audience they're going to have that night. They probably would have scheduled when this was going to air, and Russell T Davies probably had he may not have necessarily had them in that order, but I don't know this for sure, but it would have been, I'd love to know if he knew roughly when it was going to air and if he had these characters in mind.
Yeah.
But then also going further down the line, episode 6, Rogue,
which is, I think, is my favorite of the season.
I love that episode.
Yeah, I like that one.
Brilliant.
It's proper old school Doctor Who. Like, my favorite episodes are when they take like a sci-fi concept and put it in the past, you know? Like the idea of like a space bounty hunter and aliens who are cosplaying in real, I say real, it's obviously Bridgerton inspired reality, but in like historical Renaissance setting. I think it's really cool.
Casanova, you know,
exactly.
That sort of thing. But I realized again, so when this aired, it would have just turned into June, I believe, which is Pride Month.
8th of June, yeah,
8th of June. So we're then in Pride Month. So could be complete coincidence. But if you watch the episodes, you'll get it. And the dance scene, that was so good. I actually rewound that bit.
It was good.
I've really enjoyed
They
that.
talk about that on the behind the scenes as being like such a great moment filming,
I need to watch those.
Yeah, like filming that scene.
Yeah. But I love that episode.
That was a good one. And again, Russell T Davies is just saying like, you know what, I'm gonna double down, make him black and gay, you know.
I know.
Like really,
why not go the full hog?
Really wind up the fan the fans. You know?
I mean, you know, it's all the backlash that you hear about. Could there be a black James Bond.
Oh god, yeah. Like I was thinking,
Jesus.
like Idris Elba, who was floated at one point, and I was thinking that's a cool choice, but people were.
I think he's cool.
Yeah, people.
But,
He's like the coolest guy alive, right? Like,
he's so in my eyes. He's just so British.
Exactly.
But I suppose, you know, Matt, we don't see color.
No.
we're just seeing people as people, and if people want to argue with me about that, then so be it. But I'm happy with the way that I see the world.
Yeah, we're on the same page with that completely, and I feel like it's just a shame that it just feels there's way more backlash now than there ever was. Like that new Star Wars show, The Acolyte, which is great. You know, it's been on for a few weeks now, and the backlash of that has been insane. Like, I mean, I've been watching the show, and it's you know, it's an inoffensive, as a quality of the show, it's an inoffensive 7 out of 10. You know, it's not amazing, it's not terrible, but you'd think it was like the worst show ever made based on the reviews.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Like, and a lot of it is just racism because they cast a black female lead. There's a lot of backlash to that, calling it woke Star Wars and stuff. It drives me nuts, to be honest.
Going back to my show, for me, the message I found in that was probably quite obvious, but it was all about. I've written some notes here about the importance of the funding or lack of for the arts. You know,
That's an interesting take. Yeah,
that's what I took from it. A bit of
the idea of like the arts disappearing from the world because
the sadness, in the world. Look,
and how much we need it, right? How much we need music.
Yeah, that is actually what I've put here, reminding people of how important music is.
That's great.
You know, if it goes, then I found that there is something like that in each episode to a degree. Maybe not in every single one. Maybe I missed them in the ones I didn't write stuff about. But it's like with episode 3 again, which is Boom. I wrote again. It's it could be, I don't know, but this is what I've personally taken from it. The ambulances, symbolism for real ones, which are too expensive in real life. There isn't enough.
Yeah, I took that.
So yeah, that was quite obvious to me.
Well, for me, it's like also, so that was the first episode. This is obviously the first season to really be pushed in the US with the Disney Plus release, right? Before this, they weren't pushed in the US. I really took that as a comment on the US healthcare system. Because in the US, if you need an ambulance, you've got to pay for it. It's not like we're used to in the NHS or here in Canada where it's covered by your insurance or by the government. So
I love the NHS. You know, there's things happening over here.
It's in dire straits right now. It's in dire straits.
Yeah,
it really is.
So I understand the structure of the episode being faith versus the I don't want to say the saviors, because some people find saviors within faith, but that was the construct of the episode. It was, you know, the Anglicans.
Yeah.
I noticed that as soon as we go dog color, right? Okay, this is what we're going about.
So the Anglican angle, that is so the writer of that episode, Stephen Moffat, he's done that before in earlier seasons. He's had Anglican monks before. There's definitely a
he's got a connection there somehow.
Yeah, he seems to be just interested as a writer in those kind of the idea of like religion having a military force, which through history it always kind of did. You think of the Crusades, and it's always been a thing, right? The idea of the church having an army. So it's almost like taking that concept and planting it into science fiction. And I think he's an atheist, but he writes about faith a lot. Also, the idea of Vanguard, which they, again, I think is a reference to some previous seasons, like the company Vanguard that is the technology company that builds the mines and the weapons. It's kind of it's an obvious statement on like military industrial complex, right? The idea of like
I got that.
Companies basically creating the war to sustain their profits. The mine he steps on just reminds me of a Roomba, though. That's all I could think. You know, the robot vacuum cleaners. That's all I could think.
I know. Budget was hindering by that point. They were like, right, someone get the robo who
stick some lights around it. Done. That's all I could think of.
No, I.
But
yeah,
but the idea of the
myself.
visual with the LED lights around it is really clever because they could keep cutting to that visual to build the tension,
Yeah.
right? Instead of having a clock or whatever, having that light go up and down. Was from it because Doctor Who doesn't usually do tension, but I thought they did a great job.
Oh, 73 yards was brilliant.
You like that one, right?
Episode 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So episode 4 is
So-
kind of interesting. It's kind of a self-contained epic story. It kind of contained in one episode, isn't it? It's kind of feels like it could have been, a whole season, right? The arc.
The Doctor is probably only in there for about 2 minutes.
Yeah, and this is an
The whole
interesting
thing.
episode because it goes to show how these things come about. Because I was watching some of the behind the scenes. Ncuti Gatwa wasn't available. He was off filming whatever season of Sex Education at the time. So they had to basically write an episode where he wasn't in it, and this is what they came up with. Like,
Wow.
pretty cool that the constraints of not having the actor is what
Yeah.
does this, right? Is what leads to stuff like this.
And that's, I think, where we've always had our most creative moments.
Yeah.
Those really late nights where we've got no money.
No
We're
resources.
living in somebody else's house. So surfing for a bit and all of that, and trying to get whatever filming jobs we can and visual effects jobs we can, is when I feel, 3 a.m. I'm like, hey Matt, I've got this idea. I can't see how we're going to do it, but let's script it. And we'd stay up and, have a nap at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then get up and start writing again. And that constraint,
I think constraints are so important.
It's brilliant.
So important. If you get unlimited budget, unlimited resources,
where do you start?
You've almost got too much creativity, and it's hard to, the parameters. Having parameters makes things better, I think. I believe that one of when you see people complaining about TV shows and movies, a lot of the time they're complaining about things that as if they were a decision that was made on purpose, whereas we know a lot of the time when watching stuff that, they probably couldn't get this for that day, or they didn't expect it, and I like it sometimes when you can see it kind of makes things feel a bit rough around the edges when you can almost see those decisions. It's kind of like how in going back to Dot and Bubble, there's a whole bit at the beginning where it's like the guy said, the weather satellite isn't working today, so it's going to be overcast and rainy. It's like, that's because they were filming it in Cardiff in the winter time, so they had to come up with a story reason as to why it was kind of dingy and overcast, right? They wrote,
when it's meant to be this utopia.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, we'll just do a line about the weather satellite being broken. It's like, I love that. It's creative. It's creativity, right? It's kind of working with what you've got,
Yeah, and I think that's why you and me have always loved, and where a lot of our ideas have always gone back to the premise of either one or two characters just stuck somewhere. And the reason I think we like that is because the story is what should matter. And I always wanted to test myself of can I write, one, a story, and two, a screenplay that warrants not having to even do many cutaways, which kind of like wipes away all the editing that I've learned. Well, kind of, if you're clever with it, almost one shot, like Elephant, if you remember that film,
the school shooting one.
The school shooting where it's one continuous shot and then it starts again, and then
I love that movie. It's so well made.
so
Gus
good.
Van Sant, right? Yeah, who directed that one? Yeah,
Brilliant.
That's a good film.
Yeah, but those sort of things where it's, I mean, we came up with a few different ideas of characters in certain situations.
I feel like that's what Stephen Moffat was going for with Boom. To be honest, like, having the Doctor just stood on a mine for a whole episode. It's all just dialogue and sort of, there's not much more to
Tension.
it. Yeah, tension and dialogue, right? It's a similar idea to what you were saying.
Oh yeah, it kind of is. If if you was to, the only reason it feels bigger than it is because we picture it as a field where they are. But if they were stuck in a room or, you know, tied up to something, then I think when you're watching something like that, you physically feel constrained yourself. But maybe they built up the tension in a different way.
Yeah.
Because physically he could move his arms and he could do, you know, there were people running around,
but yeah, the idea of being one location, kind of, they don't really move from that spot. If you think about it, of all the episodes, that could be a stage play, right? You could do that episode of the stage
100%.
play, but all the others are way too big and jump around too much. But that episode could be a stage play, and I think that's when something is more self-contained. You can think of it as a stage play, you know.
One episode we haven't really spoken about is Space Babies, number 1.
Yeah, let's go back to
1.
Space Babies. What did you think?
Freaky.
Yeah, it's not my favorite episode, and it's not one that I don't think the fans responded that well to. I feel like one thing it did well was it let people know that this show doesn't take itself too seriously. So if it's your first episode, it's like setting the tone for the show by having such a crazy concept and having fun with it, you know?
Yeah, it was fun. That's what I would say. It's, you know, I know we talk about like symbolism and all of that. It sounds like we're really serious, but we're talking about Doctor Who.
Exactly.
So, you know, I'm having fun with it and I'm giggling, but I'm really glad that Space Babies was episode 1, so that I didn't feel disappointed halfway through of going, oh, that was okay. But yeah, it was. I think if I'd watched it on the night that it aired, I would have been glad there was the other episode, Maestro, because Maestro, in comparison, for me was just so good. Actually, just the character Maestro, I could just watch. They were like a Disney villain in real life.
Exactly, completely.
Well,
That's
not
what.
real life, but in,
Yeah,
you know,
live action. Yeah.
In live action for that episode, it was. And I know there are live action films now of, say, Disney characters, but that one felt. It's different because of the setting that it's in, you know, and we don't know it. And
yeah. One thing that Space Babies did do was kind of that throwback to like old school Doctor Who, where it's like them trapped on a spaceship with a monster. That's a very classic trope of like going back to the old show, you know, that's a very classic Doctor Who trope. So they definitely echoed that there.
I get that.
And, you know, we talked about the refugee message. There is a little bit of politics in there, a bit on the nose, but then they have the silliness of the babies and the poop powered spaceship and all that stuff. The snot. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of
the boogeyman. Obviously,
the boogeyman. Yeah.
It's very literal.
That's the interesting thing as well. You know, this is the first episode of Disney Who, and they use bogeyman in a literal sense, whereas in the US they don't say bogey for snot, they say booger. So that was a weird one. Like, if you're trying to appeal to Americans, maybe don't use a British term that they might not know. So, I don't know.
Do you think that it was written before the contract was signed?
Potentially, yeah.
Because it feels that way.
Yeah.
Or Russell T Davies was just like, I'm sticking to British terms.
Yeah,
that's it.
It could be.
I feel that he would probably do that.
Yeah, that could be right. Yeah, because they didn't really Americanize the season much, did they? I'm thinking about it now.
I didn't pick up anything.
No.
That I haven't. I would have probably made some notes, but I haven't picked anything up. I suppose the only real American reference, but it's not really an American reference, was just in Space Babies episode 1. I just loved. For me, it felt like a reference to Alien.
Yes. Yeah, completely.
Which I love. I love it. Sigourney Weaver in the original Alien. I thought that was quite cool.
I did like one of my favorite parts of Space Babies was the swear filter on the. That was pretty funny. That was pretty
good.
funny. That was some of Russell T Davies' best comedy I thought in this season.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Kind of called it from the beginning, but wanted to see if we were right.
Oh, you talking about the ending with the reveal?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So 73 Yards is the episode where they go to Wales. They're on this sort of cliffside. The doctor disappears, and Ruby is then on her own. But there's a figure that she continues to see. But she can only get so close.
It's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. I thought that the idea of them being just the right distance to where you can't recognize their face is quite a cool concept. It's very Doctor Who. Very Stephen Moffat, actually. Stephen Moffat, who ran the show for a few seasons while Russell T Davies was off doing other things. It's a kind of concept he would have came up with, like a bit creepy, bit unnerving, and sort of you can't
Bit
quite put your
darker.
finger on it, you know. That's he's very much that kind of writer. But I thought it was great as well, and it's interesting. So this season in general, it's got much more like fantasy elements than previous Doctor Who seasons. So the idea of like the fairy circle and stuff like that was never really a thing before. They've introduced it this series, and basically in those specials I mentioned, the three specials from last year, they sort of, Russell T Davies sort of does an episode where they change the rules a bit, and they sort of do say, we know this has always been a sci-fi show, but we're going to start introducing more like fantastical fantasy elements, and that's just the way it is now. And he really, this season, that even Maestro, right, is not really a science fiction concept, right? It's more of a fantasy concept. So yeah, going back to 73 Yards, the idea of a fairy circle, it kind of tied in with that as well. And I don't hate it. I feel like a show that's 50, 60 years old, it needs to introduce these concepts, you know. And if Marvel can have Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch as fantasy witch characters alongside hardcore science fiction, then why not Doctor Who, right? And interestingly, Russell T Davies has mentioned a lot in interviews that, you know, the reason he wanted to come back to Doctor Who is because he was watching a lot of Marvel and thinking, we can do that. We've got the perfect universe for this kind of storytelling as well. So big influence, I think, on certain decisions.
Yes, I suppose we're on to the last two. So episode 7, The Legend of Ruby Sunday.
Yeah, so this was the two-part finale. I'll be honest, I preferred the first part. I thought that was a really nice build-up. And this is a problem I've always had with Russell T Davies, and I think a lot of the fans would agree. He does a good build-up, and a lot of the time the payoff is never quite worth the build-up, if that makes sense. Right. Very good at promising stuff, but not always delivering. So I really liked the first part. I thought the idea of like the time window and all that stuff was cool. Again, I can see these Marvel references all over the place. I don't know if you ever watched WandaVision, the Disney show.
I haven't, but I want to. It's been on my list.
That show has that sort of analog, sort of VHS effect feel when they're in the reality in WandaVision, the alternate reality, and very similar to the time window stuff, where it's like it's kind of meant to be reproduced from an old videotape, right? So they kind of really lean into that. So visually, it reminded me of that, and you know, I thought the build-up was pretty cool. What did you think of the Legend of Ruby Sunday as someone who is new to the show?
As in just that storyline.
The storyline, the way it sort of introduced so many concepts, right? With Unit HQ and all these characters, and
it was good to know that we weren't duped in 73 Yards with I've forgotten her name, but the lady that works for...
You're right, she's in 73 Yards, isn't she? Yeah, she is.
And I thought...
So that was your first time meeting her, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So first time meeting her. So for me, I thought, oh God, no, she's going to be in cahoots with the lady that we can't see, and something's going to go down here. And then she turns up in episode 7 And I'm like, oh, she is good. So okay, so we can trust her. But yeah, I liked the storyline. It was a simple storyline that was easy to follow. And I think anyone could follow it, which was nice. Okay, so the character,
the god of death, sort of Egyptian inspired almost, right? Like,
yeah, was your typical kind of ending to. It was good. It was all right.
see, it's interesting.
I enjoyed it
because if you're a hardcore Doctor Who fan, going back, to the original show, people have been waiting for this villain to return to Doctor Who since like the 70s, right? So it's like it's a big deal bringing him back.
Yeah, he didn't do much.
But as a new fan, I was just wondering like what you really felt about that.
He was kind of there, but he wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like if we were old school Doctor Who nerds, we'd be way more excited about it than we ended up being. For me, it was just like, oh, they tried to sort of red herring it a bit, didn't they, with the whole Sue Tech TARDIS thing, and then it's like revealed that it's actually this old classic villain. But if, like us, you've never watched the old shows, really, it doesn't mean much, I knew of Sue Tech, I just was never that.
They tried to mention it. They tried to reference it.
Yeah.
A bit. When they had the screen and they were showing old clips, and I took that as that's when the previous doctors had come against it.
Okay, yeah.
However, I had to go and do my own digging to make sure that I had understood that right, and I was right. But you could easily miss that. You go to the Louvre for 30 seconds, come back, over your head.
Well, it's very much that kind of show, right? That's why I was really interested in your takes on these things, like going back to Rogue, that part where he's getting the holographic scan and it shows like all the doctors and stuff around him. It's like if you were brand new to the show and didn't really know the history of the doctors and stuff, that would be really confusing, right? It's like you're seeing all these floating heads of different people who he's been.
I think you'd have to have lived in a completely different world to have not understood that.
That's true. Yeah. But it's stuff for the fans, isn't it? It's there for the hardcore fan base. That stuff isn't there for it's not really there for newcomers. It's so
it's for it'll come to me.
Fan service.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, fan service.
Yeah.
I took so much subliminal messages from the last two episodes.
Okay.
Especially the last one.
Okay.
Especially the last one. I love the build up. Yeah, I'll agree with you there about the build up of the first half. So episode 7. The build up was great. Not knowing, is she going to turn around? Isn't she going to turn around? Who the hell is her mom? I think those 2 episodes were almost written like a soap.
Yeah, that's true.
Very much like a soap. Like, are we going to find out? Aren't we going to find out? But your classical formatting, cliffhanger style.
That's true. Yeah.
I love the Theresa May reference.
Oh, to the
with the dance and the robot dance.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just like subtly done.
No.
It was really done. It's like it was a good, I don't know, 15 seconds of it. It's quite a long time. I don't quote me on the duration, but
it was pretty well. Yeah. Did you catch the Elon Musk reference as well?
Whereabouts?
It's in The Legend of Ruby Sunday. They're talking about how it's not our first time taking down a tech billionaire, and then they're like, yeah, we've caught quite a few, and then one of them says, apart from the obvious, one day. I was just like, I turned to Meg, I was like, that's Elon.
Yeah, I love the Theresa May reference there, and just if you listen to the speech as well of what she was saying, very Tory-esque.
Yeah, it was.
But obviously before she gets possessed by death, but so I'm kind of merging the last 2 episodes in my head a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely a 2-parter, a good one to watch back to back, I would say. I waited a week between them as well, so I think that adds to the You know, is it going to be a letdown? Is it going to... It's only because I've been burned by Russell T Davies before. He's done a lot of big 2-3 part finales in the past, and there's been some ones where they've done a nice setup and then not a great conclusion.
Yeah.
And for me, the Empire of Death episode 8 was a bit of a letdown because just going back to what I said earlier, I keep mentioning this, but I think Russell T Davies is very inspired by Marvel this season, just in general. The whole idea of like, you know, the god of death, Sutek, turning people into dust is very much like what happens in Avengers Infinity War, where Thanos, the big bad guy, turns people into dust. That's kind of his thing, wipes out the population that way. And then in the next part, in part 2 of Avengers Endgame, they have to go back in time to stop him from doing that. I will say I'm glad that they didn't do the whole going back in time and stopping him from doing that thing. They found a more creative way, I guess, of doing it. But I've got to say, it's the most like convoluted and long-winded way to get to a maternity test ever written, you know, like obviously the thing about Russell Davies is he's really good when it comes to human stories, like the idea of Ruby trying to find her real mother. All that stuff is really nice and it's well done, and that was almost the heart of the season, right? And the heart of the ending was about that more than anything else. Everything else was just kind of there and happening. So I feel like the two stories never really came together. It felt a bit, how do we make this story about finding out who Ruby's mom is, whilst tying that in with this god of death and all that? And it just felt a bit convoluted to me. That's just how I felt.
Yeah, it didn't feel heavy enough to warrant her still being alive.
Yeah.
In a way. It was like, okay, but why? What is the... I mean, it is mentioned why he wants to know who she... Well, is it actually? Have I missed something?
Sutek. I think it's just because he's got the answers to everything, because he's always been there through time and space, right? Across all these different existences. But the one answer he can't get is, who is this woman? I can't see this woman's face. And in the show, they kind of make out that because he can't figure that out is the only reason why he's so obsessed with it.
Doesn't seem big enough.
Yeah. And I get it.
A bit like,
I get it. It's meant to be like, oh, we're all so important, you know, even if you're just this girl who was abandoned. And
you're average.
Just average girl who was abandoned. You're still so important. They really hit that message home at the end, where she's like, she's just a normal person. And then she's not normal. She's extraordinary, you know, that kind of thing.
We'll touch on that in a sec.
Yeah. That's very Russell T Davies again, just making out that like we're all important or whatever. But yeah, I just don't feel like it came together that well at the end. And it's a shame, because I like the season overall, but yeah, that final episode for me, and my favorite stuff was the stuff at the end with Ruby meeting her mother and stuff. That stuff I liked.
One thing I will say is, and the bit where I really felt a bit, where was it an anti-climax for me, was so that the Empire of Death, episode 8, so the last episode, and it's when the Doctor goes, right, I'm gonna have to become the monster now. And I remember thinking, oh, what's gonna happen here? And he goes and opens the door, basically, you know, cuts the cord.
Oh yeah.
And he goes in the vortex, and that's pretty much him gone. But I was like, is that it? What was the build up of him becoming a monster about?
Yeah.
Or have I missed something?
He feels really bad about destroying this god of death that killed everyone. But at the same time, he's perfectly happy to... There's that bit, isn't there, where... is it Harriet? The black lady who gets possessed and becomes the demon. There's a bit where he just like opens a part of the TARDIS and fires a beam at her and she dies. It's like you didn't feel any remorse for killing an innocent woman who was possessed, but you feel...
He could come back,
Yeah, he killed her, but then you felt super remorseful about killing the god of death, who's destroyed half the universe. And that's another thing. Russell T Davies, I wish he wouldn't go so big. Why did it have to be about every single molecule of the universe is being destroyed by this god of death? Where it's like, you could have just made it a bit of a smaller story and still told Ruby's given the conclusion with Ruby, but without going to, because every season of Doctor Who has to end with, it's the Doctor trying to save the entire universe from destruction, and it's like, come on, we've done this 100 times, and just, you don't need to do that, you know. That's just my feeling on it. Interesting ideas in there. I like the bit where it was a bit random, but when he goes to get the spoon and then he gets the metal.
I'm going to talk about that in a second.
It's cool. It's just so random, but it works, you know.
Well, you think it's random, but I took something from that spoon. I've always known, like, a spoon, if you give somebody a spoon, it means it's an act of love. It's a caring thing.
Okay, that's interesting. I never made that connection.
So that's what I took from that at first glance. And then I thought, is there more to this? And then I did look into it, and actually, with the Egyptians, so I had that already. So you're seeing it as a spoon. I'm seeing it as an act of love. You know, you're passing something on to somebody. And then I did some more research and found that the ancient Egyptians, apparently, a spoon would symbolize wealth and power.
Okay.
Right? Then, further down the line of the last episode, so Emperor of Death, episode 8, I don't know if it's my eyes or not, but the Doctor's necklace looks like the vessel part of a spoon.
Ah.
I don't know. I might be wrong, and we'll have to have another look.
That's interesting.
Or have a look. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. I don't know. So yeah, I thought that's not just a spoon.
That's interesting. I always just that's deeper than what I thought. I didn't know about the spoon thing. For me, it was like, oh, it's just a bit of fun. Like, the Doctor's going to save the universe with a spoon. You know, it's kind of like a nice little comedy moment. You know, but I mean, that seems deeper. So I'll go with that.
I mean, she also, so when he asks, have you got any metal, and she says, you know, metals.
She says it's like so valuable now.
It's
like
valuable, right? So, you know, it's again wealth, and you know, there's that saying of somebody's born with a silver spoon in the mouth, and so it's value. It comes with a cost attached to it. So that's what I took from it. It's not just a spoon. There we go. That could be the name of the episode.
Not just a spoon. There you go.
It's not just a spoon.
I'll go with that one.
There you go.
It's a good name.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of symbolism in this last episode. Obviously, the messaging about the fact, you know, Ruby keeps continuously saying she's just an average woman. No, she's not. She's a nurse. It's like, yeah, come on.
That was nice. That was really nice, actually.
How many times do we have to actually get this into shows like this to make a point about, come on, give the NHS some money?
That's a good point. I forgot about that, but yeah, that's a nice line.
It was quite prominent for me. And then obviously the dust of death. I don't know if Russell T Davies was trying to touch on the way that COVID spread, or whether it's about the environment, or a bit both. I don't know, but they're the two things that came to mind.
Yeah, again, for me, it was very Marvel did a whole thing where like people were dusted out of existence, and that's kind of what I took from it. So yeah, it felt like,
maybe I go too deep.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm looking at it from like a visual point of view. You're looking at
and I'm coming more of the
philosophical and sort of what's the
editing.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah, because the editor's eye, I think, is how more of the offline editor sort of.
Yeah, I like that you bring some deeper meanings to this stuff as well. It's good.
The mesmeric meaning,
Exactly.
Matt, as a tutor of ours from uni used to say.
Mesmeric.
You've got to look at the mesmeric meaning.
Mesmeric meaning, exactly.
The mesmeric meaning.
I did like that. The reason Sutek is keeping them alive is because he's obsessed with this question of like, who is Ruby's mother, right? He wants to know the answer to that question, and it's like, in a way, I guess that it is kind of mentioned in the episode as well. That itself adds meaning to Ruby's mother, so much meaning that literally they are the only reason why the universe still exists, because of Ruby's mother. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah.
I thought the memory TARDIS was kind of cool. It was like an idea of like,
I thought it was quite
again,
cool.
that's for the hardcore nerdy types. It's like all of those references in there are for like going back to the 1960s, you know, like all the little things on the shelves and stuff. So it's cool that they did that.
It's weird because I know I haven't been, say, a hardcore Doctor Who fan, but that as I've grown up in Britain, and especially in the, I don't know, you know, growing up watching BBC and being into like your nerdier things and Comic-Con and all of that, and you know, my dad being into Star Trek, and you can't really get away from the cultures of Doctor Who. So I do have a weird nostalgia for certain parts of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Like I'll see something or I'll see a Doctor Who, not an actual doctor, on TV, and I will instantly go, oh yeah, that must have been like what, 2006, 2007. God, that takes me back. Even though I didn't watch the show, but for me, it still takes me back to a time.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know,
for me, a lot of it comes down to like when, you know, being a fan of the reboot show from 2005, like doing a lot of like research into older references and stuff, and that's when I go down the rabbit hole of reading about the old show and learning things about it more so than watching it, you know.
It's interesting, and and just some overall some great writing. Stephen Moffat also was co-writer on one of my favorite films, Tintin.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
he was writer on that film. Yeah, his era of Doctor Who, I think, will always be like my favorite era. He did from 2010 to 2016, I believe, 2017. His era was like really good. I loved it. He wrote for two Doctors, Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi, and Peter Capaldi is probably my favorite Doctor. He's just amazing in the role. So
going back to Tintin, I'm still holding out faith for number 2.
I saw rumblings about it recently, you know, like very recently.
There's always been a rumbling about it, man.
Yeah.
Don't get your hopes.
I'm not
I've been waiting so long for this film.
Here we go. Exciting news for Tintin fans. 5 hours ago. This is from Digital Chew. Good old Digital Chew. Exciting news for Tintin fans. Peter Jackson is busy with Adventures of Tintin 2, apparently.
I've been saying this for about a decade.
Definitely working.
Definitely working.
I think you sent me an article at least once every year for the past 10 years.
Every year, I'm like, it's happening. You know me, I'm the most, like, what's it called? You got your pessimist and your optimist.
You're optimistic, yeah.
And even I'm starting to chisel away at that now. I'm like, ugh. I'm turning into Eeyore when I think about Tintin.
We'll go and watch it when we're, 76 years old. We'll go and watch.
Oh yeah.
We'll go and watch the Tintin 2. By that point, it will just be like plug it into your brain and you're inside the movie. But we'll watch it.
Yeah. I'm on the unicorn ship. I don't want to keep rehashing films that there are other films that I love, but the making of Tintin is really well presented, and what I love about it, and if you get a chance to watch it, I might have even shown you it years ago.
I think we watched it together at some point. I feel like we did.
But it's basically the beginnings of what filmmaking is now for certain genres. But when that was being made, it was more of, I think My personal opinion is, I think they used Tintin as an experimental film for both Peter Jackson and Steven Spielberg.
Going into virtual filmmaking, right? Like virtual
Yeah, I
production.
really do.
Yeah.
Because if you watch it, they're pretty much, to me, it just looks like it's not, but it looks like a school gym with mats on the floor, and they've just got the, the facial recognition cameras, the sensors, dots all over the place, but they're acting. So it has the feel of rehearsal, but they are making the film.
Well, what's insane is that technology back then, obviously Avatar and Tintin and Planet of the Apes kind of were the films that pushed it forwards. That technology back then was like cutting edge, incredibly out of reach of the average consumer because it was, high-end movie studios only. Now, 12 years later, 10 years later, whatever, it's accessible now. Like,
We can do it.
yeah, like Unreal Engine.
We have done it.
You can download MetaHumans and use your iPhone for developing full facial performances, and it's incredible. And I mentioned to you last time we spoke, I was going to meet with the university dean of one of the colleges here. I actually went yesterday and hung out with them at the college. Yeah, it was a great day, and they've got 2 full motion capture studios with the multiple cameras, full volume, the suits. So
that'll be standard now.
Yeah, so kids now in college are learning as they're developing their projects how to do the Tintin thing in college.
Insane.
Very cool.
It's great, but
it's great. Yeah.
This is a great closing to link with the beginning, but we really didn't finish uni that long ago.
No.
Despite
the grey hairs, it was.
Yeah, that's why I've turned all the lights off so you can't see anything. But yeah, despite all of that, we really didn't, and I don't know if it's scary or not of how
the pace.
Yeah. Because I know there was obviously a pace from, say, like the technology in the 80s to the 90s would have felt like, scary, look at all these computers.
Yeah,
I guess it was all in theory. It was all in theory. Yeah. It hadn't actually happened.
I guess if you think about it, obviously it's accelerated a lot recently with AI. But like, Betamax, VHS, and then DV tapes and stuff, it did kind of slowly get there over time. But then it just feels like it really accelerated.
Excelled.
Yeah, with, really like did. I said, like the idea of like going and doing an Avatar style performance capture when we were at university. I mean, at the time I was writing my dissertation thesis on performance capture, right? That was what because I was doing the whole thing about like Andy Serkis, Planet of the Apes, whether or not it was digital makeup or whether it was the animation, the question of the time, wasn't it, around that time? But like I had no access to any of this technology then. But if I was writing that dissertation now, I could go to the college and actually, have a go at doing my own digital performances and really testing the technology. So it's a crazy difference, really. And we were in the cutting edge post-production university in the country.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't like they were behind on technology. They were.
No, I mean, when you think just to put it into perspective, the uni we went to, we spent our first year in the original building, which we mentioned was in Kent.
Yeah.
Right. And then we had to be there for the first year because they were finishing off the new building. Now, if you've ever been to the O2 Arena in London, in Greenwich, you will see a stone's throw away, literally about, I don't know, a couple yards.
It's right near the entrance, right opposite the entrance.
Put it this way, our student union was the O2 Arena.
At the time, that's all they had, wasn't it?
That was our student union. We had 25%, I will never forget it, we had 25% off everything at the O2 Arena. I got very fat. But it was great. It was a great time.
Lot of time in Nando's.
Lot of time. There's a lot of places we spent a lot of time. But just so you can understand of where it is, and the building was brand new. So all the technology, all the kit, the color grading suite,
The MAM. Do you remember the MAM?
Upload to the MAM.
It was like a big server, wasn't it? They had this new. It never worked because it was new, right?
No, it never worked.
It was like brand new.
I wrote a screenplay about that MAM.
Yeah. It was like a brand new.
Fork the MAM.
Yeah.
That was it. Don't forget to fork the MAM.
But yeah, it was like a big server that all the media was stored on, and for the time it was pretty cutting edge, you know, like having this centralized system that every single thing at the university ran off. It's probably pretty standard now, but so yesterday I was having flashbacks to that Kent Ravensbourne building because I was walking around this college and they had all like the Avid edit suites and stuff, you know, and I was just thinking like, wow, it was like edit suite 1, 2, 3. That's taking me back to the cave. Like, I remember sitting in the cave with a bunch of like vampiric editing students who hadn't seen sunlight in weeks and were sat there fueling themselves on Red Bull. Do you remember? Fucking hell.
There was Red Bull, and do you remember like one of the only takeaway places that would deliver to us was that pizza place.
Yeah.
But it was huge.
It was 18-inch or something, wasn't it? Something like that, wasn't it? Or 20 or something. It was ridiculous.
It was massive.
Yeah.
It was £10.
Yeah.
I remember.
No, it was bigger than 18. Was it like? Oh, I can't. Was it 22? It was some ridiculous size pizza.
It was massive. I remember getting you one for your birthday.
That was a deal
in the
for a
cave.
tenner. Good deal for a tenner
Yeah,
back then.
it was
Probably about £38 now with inflation. If you went back there.
God, yeah, I had to go to the gate and exchange the money and then come back. But yeah, it was like a weird drug deal for this giant pizza. Taking it back to this pitch black room, trying to see people by their teeth and eyes, you know, because you couldn't see anything. It was just so dark, but it was great and it was old school. And one of the things I loved about it was one of my favorite projects ever.
Manual analog editing. It was a way to teach you, like, you know, like the importance of planning.
Maybe we do that next episode.
Yeah, the importance of planning before you just start editing, because if you've got no way to control Z, it's like
we're screwed.
You're screwed. Exactly. We're not going to talk about Doctor Who every week. Obviously, this is felt like a good show to talk about. As I mentioned earlier, with Chris being new to the show, me being more established, it felt like a nice dynamic to talk about the show. And also with it just finishing its run last weekend, we thought it was good timing. So yeah, we'll try to think of something, whether it's a TV show or a movie, we can really dive in deep with. That would be great.
Yeah, we have some ideas, delving more into our sort of personal experiences as well, and how they compare to what we're seeing on TV and screen today, and looking more into the symbolism in film and TV and what you see in the media, because everything is there for a reason. You don't just show something for no reason, and I love that. But yeah, we'll delve into that another time. Cool. All right, I think that's us done then, Matt.
Great, thanks, Chris. See you soon.
Yeah. Who's editing?
Yeah, that's the next question.